If you ever notice your eyes looking burned under harsh fluorescent light, don't tell yourself it's exhaustion. I did. I leaned over a gas station sink, staring at the red veins spread across the whites of my eyes, trying to ignore the faint pressure behind them. For a moment, I thought I heard something. Not a voice, not a sound exactly. And then it was gone, leaving me with the uneasy certainty that whatever had started in the woods hadn't stayed there. Two days earlier, everything had been deliberately uneventful. That was the point. I chose a familiar Appalachian trail, nothing remote or risky, told a friend my route, packed light, and left my phone on airplane mode. I wasn't chasing mystery or isolation. I just wanted quiet that didn't come from shutting a door. The first day gave me exactly that. Long ridgelines, damp earth, cold water running over stone. No other hikers, no distant chatter, just the steady rhythm of walking and breathing. I set up my tent near a small clearing where the ground was flat and the trees spaced out evenly, and I slept hard, convinced I'd picked the right place. The second day felt almost staged in its calm. The weather held, the trail stayed empty. Even the forest sounds seemed balanced, birds overhead, insects low in the brush, a creek murmuring somewhere downhill. By late afternoon, I was tired in a good way. When I returned to camp, the air smelled of wet leaves and pine sap, heavy but familiar. That changed right after dusk. The forest didn't go quiet all at once. The insects stopped first, then the birds. It wasn't gradual. It felt segmented, like someone turning off layers of sound. The creek didn't stop, but it became distant, muffled, as if the water were suddenly farther away than it should have been. The air thickened, pressing against my chest, making each breath feel deliberate. I tried to rationalize it. Weather shift, pressure change, my body reacting to isolation. I ate, checked my gear, and climbed into my sleeping bag with my headlamp beside me. Sleep came in short fragments. Then sometime after midnight, I woke up already tense, my heart beating too fast for no clear reason. At first there was nothing. Then I heard voices. They were close, closer than I was comfortable with. Low and steady, not whispering but not loud either. Conversational. Calm, like two people talking just beyond the edge of sight. They didn't sound lost. They didn't sound cautious. And I hadn't seen another person on the trail in 2 days. I lay still, holding my breath, listening through the thin wall of the tent. The voices stayed in one place. They didn't drift or fade. My hand found the zipper, and I opened it just enough to let the cold air in. The sound didn't change. I switched on my flashlight. The voices stopped instantly, not fading out, stopping. I aimed the beam into the trees, sweeping the clearing, the trunks, the brush line. Nothing moved. No footsteps, no retreating sound, no disturbance of any kind. Just empty forest, exactly as it had looked all day. The light showed nothing unusual. The silence didn't break. I stood there for several seconds longer than I should have, then turned the flashlight off, closed the tent, and sat completely still until morning, careful not to move, listening for anything that didn't come back. Morning didn't bring relief. It brought clarity, which was worse. The forest looked normal in daylight, too normal. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, the clearing appeared unchanged, and birds slowly returned as if someone had lifted a restriction. I packed and unpacked my gear twice, telling myself that what I'd heard was stress, fatigue, maybe voices carrying from farther than I realized. But the unease didn't fade. It stayed lodged in my chest, quiet and persistent, like a thought I was avoiding. I kept looking toward the trees where the sound had come from. It wasn't a direction I'd paid attention to before. Now it pulled at me in a way I didn't like. If someone had been close enough to talk outside my tent, there should have been signs. Footprints, broken brush, something. Ignoring that felt worse than checking. I followed the line I remembered, moving slowly, scanning the ground more than the trees. About 20 meters from camp, I stopped. There was a shelter there. Not a tent, not a tarp. A low lean-to made of fallen branches woven together and pressed against a downed log. Moss covered most of it, thick and old, hanging in damp strands. It didn't look freshly built, but I was certain it hadn't been there the day before. I had walked this area while setting up camp. I would have noticed it. The ground around it caught my attention next. The prints weren't boot marks. They weren't animal tracks either. They looked like bare footprints, but stretched, too long at the front, uneven in depth, with spacing that didn't match a normal stride. Some impressions were deeper, as if whoever made them had paused there, shifting weight without moving on. I crouched and studied them longer than I should have. The dirt was disturbed recently. This wasn't old. Whatever had made the shelter had been there again, possibly during the night. The sensible thing was to leave. I knew that. The trailhead wasn't far, and I had no reason to stay. But nothing about the shelter suggested immediate danger. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't fortified. It looked used. That bothered me more. Someone, or something, had chosen this exact spot, close enough to my camp that I could hear them speak. I spent the day nearby, never too close, never fully turning my back on it. As the hours passed, I noticed something else. The area around the shelter felt empty in a way the rest of the forest didn't. Birds landed on branches, then moved on. Small animals skirted the clearing but never crossed it. There were no fresh sounds of movement, no signs of anyone returning. By late afternoon, the pressure from the night before crept back in. The air grew heavier again, not oppressive, just noticeably different. I considered packing up at least a dozen times. Each time I stopped. Leaving without understanding felt like walking away from something unfinished. As dusk approached, I made a decision that felt practical at the time. If someone was using that shelter, I wanted proof. I set my phone on a small tripod, aimed it at the lean-to from a distance, and started recording. I positioned it carefully, hidden enough not to reflect light, then returned to my tent. The forest settled early. I lay down fully dressed, flashlight in hand, listening as the last daytime sounds faded. I didn't expect anything to happen. That made it worse when, sometime after dark, I woke with the same tightness in my chest. Already alert, already listening, knowing the night wasn't going to stay quiet. I woke before I heard anything. My eyes opened into darkness, and I knew immediately that sleep was over. The forest felt different again, not silent, not loud, just wrong in a way that made staying still feel necessary. Then close to the tent, something began to whisper. It wasn't clear enough to understand, and it didn't move. It stayed right where it was, as if whoever was there had already chosen a spot. I turned on the flashlight. The whispering stopped at once. I waited, listening, but nothing followed. After a few seconds, I unzipped the tent and stepped out, keeping the beam low and steady. The clearing looked undisturbed, but the ground near the shelter wasn't. New impressions pressed into the soil, deeper than before, closer together, like someone had been standing there for a while. I reached the phone. The moment my fingers touched it, I pulled my hand back. The phone was hot, painfully so, like it had been left in direct sun all day. The casing had softened slightly at the edges. Nothing else around it showed signs of heat. I waited until it cooled enough to handle, then turned it on. The recording was still there, Most of the video showed nothing, just darkness, faint outlines of the lean-to, and the low background noise of night insects. Then, near the middle of the clip, the image shifted. The frame began to flicker, and a deep, steady hum filled the audio. Not loud, but heavy, like pressure rather than sound. The shelter started to glow. It wasn't bright at first, just a pale light seeping through the gaps in the branches, growing stronger with each second. The hum deepened. Then the screen washed out in a sudden flash, and something filled the frame. A face, too close to the camera. Features stretched, uneven, as if distorted by heat or water. The eyes were open and fixed, reflecting the light without blinking. The image lasted less than a second before the video cut to static. The phone shut off immediately after. I didn't stay. I packed without checking my gear, left things behind, and moved fast, following the trail by memory more than sight. The forest returned to normal as the sky lightened, which made everything feel worse. Nothing chased me. Nothing followed that I could see. By the time I reached the road, my head ached badly. At a gas station, under fluorescent lights, I looked in the mirror and froze. The whites of my eyes were red and irritated. Veins burst across them as if from strain or exposure. Light hurt. Blinking didn't help. I plugged the phone into an outlet and waited. After a long moment, it powered on. I opened the gallery immediately. The video wasn't there. No corrupted file, no partial clip, just older photos from the trail and nothing else. I scrolled until my hands started to shake, then stopped. I left the station and walked toward the road, trying not to think about the empty space where the recording should have been, or about how, when I closed my eyes, the pressure from the forest felt exactly the same. If this story unsettled you, leave a like and let the shadows know. Subscribe for more tales you shouldn't hear after dark. And if you've seen something you can't explain, tell us in the comments. We're always listening.